Hello, everybody. I'm super duper excited for episode number one of our webinar live stream. And I couldn't be more honored and more excited to have Jessica on as our speaker number one. Quick background, Jessica and I met in New York at a CHRO breakfast about a month or a month and a half ago. And Jessica had some really amazing and sharp pointed points around pay strategy, how to design it, why it's important, how to execute, which I get a lot of questions from other people leaders and people teams. And I thought she would be the perfect guest for our inaugural episode. So here we are. Jessica, super excited to have you. What we'll do is we'll kick things off by an intro. Would love to kind of, get to know you, your background, what you're doing at Very, how you got into the people role, and then we'll roll from there. I know we have lots of exciting discussions to kind of dig into.
Well, I'm so excited, Harris. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody who's watching. So my name is Jessica Begley. I am the Chief People Officer at a company called Very. So I'm going to come back to there in a second. As Harris said, so most people in the people world, and I'm saying people world is a capital P, most people don't really end up there by design. There's something that kind of takes you there. And I would say my background has I wish I was smart enough to design my career path to where it got me to today, but I definitely didn't. It was a little bit by accident, but I think I've always been interested in the intersection of psychology and culture. And so the world of HR, the world of people was really a nice intersection for that. My master's degree is in organizational psychology. And after my master's, I ended up in corporate retail in HR for a number of years. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are wondering, wow, why did you stay there for a number of years? And the reason is because they really let me kind of do a career lattice through my time there with the world of HR. So I had the opportunity to do recruitment, to be an HR business partner, to work on talent performance, to work on compensation, to work on policy, to work on labor relations, some areas of the world that I never really thought that I would be interested in or have exposure in. But let me tell you what, trying to figure out how to craft policies for 130,000 people, really challenging stuff, but also really interesting. One of my biggest projects right before I left that role was I did a huge compensation leveling program for 11,000 people. We had both hourly and exempt in there. And that was really an amazing time to really dig my teeth into understanding the world of compensation. And I think it was that opportunity, honestly, that really propelled me forward. So when I came to Very 3 years ago, the idea was to build out the people function. And because I had all those lattices in my career, it really served itself well. I really wanted to go to a small company. I was done with having ID numbers. I wanted to know and call people by their names. Doesn't happen in the big corporate world. So I was able to translate that experience into a small environment. A couple other interesting things to note. Very is fully distributed. We do not have an office. We don't have a headquarters, fully distributed. We're across 5 countries, and we are an IoT services consulting firm. So we build hardware devices for companies. And so if anybody's not familiar for IoT, I promise you use it. You probably use it every day. So think about all of the things in your life that you probably control from your phone. Mm-hmm. That's IoT, Internet of Things, physical devices that talk to each other through various methods of connectivity. So that's who we are. That's what we do. I'm really excited to talk to you more about how Very approaches compensation.
Amazing, Jessica. You've worn a lot of hats, maybe almost all the hats in the people function, and kind of it gives you a great vantage point of how all of these things tie together. So that's amazing. And on IoTs, my kids spend more time with our Alexa than they probably do with me. But IoTs are everywhere, exactly. So totally understand, whether it's at home or in the manufacturing field, in factories as well. So Excited to kind of click in. And I think it'll be interesting also to hear from your perspective, like you have a broad spectrum of employees, software engineers, but like other roles and functions too. So how this kind of is relevant for not just tech companies, software companies, but other companies as well. But kind of let's jump in from there. So when we had that breakfast conversation, you mentioned that you had a pay strategy defined, rolled out, no hiccups. I might have almost never heard of it going that smoothly. And certainly it's a testament to how hard it is and how multifaceted it is. And we're going to unpack that. But let's kind of start at the top. Tell us about the very pay strategy, what it is, and why you needed one. And let's go from there.
It's great, Harris. And I think the tee up is so important because here's the reality. The reality is, as much as people should never attach their worth to their compensation, people do, which is part of why compensation is one of the hardest things to have a conversation about, especially as a business, especially as a bigger organization. A lot of people still feel it's taboo. Some people want more information. Some people want less information. It's very personal. So I think it's really important to have a really defined strategy as an organization so that you're crystal clear in the way that you approach it. So I thought it would be helpful to outline a few things about how Very approaches compensation. So one, and I understand for people who maybe are not so comfortable with really transparent compensation conversations, what I'm about to say is probably going to make you feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's all right. This is different, and it's a different approach, and one size does not fit all. So this might not work for your org, but it certainly works with us at Very. So one of the things that we do is we really approach transparency and compensation from the very first moment you ever learned about us. So regardless of geography or role, every single job description / job posting has the role defined with the comp band. And the comp band is not a Netflix-esque comp band. None of this crazy several $100,000. Every comp band is like a $10,000 to $15,000 comp band. There's a little elasticity in there just because sometimes there is some differences in some levels, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But it's very well defined, and we even define within the job description the breakdown in that comp between base and variable comp. So right off the bat, first interaction you're having with us, you are clear on what the compensation is for that role. Now, I think, Harris, at that breakfast we had, somebody said to me, but what if you find the perfect person? What if you find the perfect person and it doesn't fit in the comp band? And I was like, then they're not the perfect person. And what I usually say in that moment is, this isn't the right job or the right moment. We wish you well. Let's stay in touch. But it's really important that you stick to the defined comp and then what the role pays. That's very important. So it starts at the very beginning. And again, there's no deviations to that process. Then the next piece of it. So our company is about over 80% engineering, which I think most tech companies will have similar breakdowns, right? Very heavy in engineering. And to your point, Harris, because we are in IoT, we have software engineers, firmware engineers, data scientists, electrical engineers, mechatronics engineers. What we have posted, everyone in the company can see this for all of those roles, is the comp defined by several aspects. It's the function, so the ones that I mentioned, it's the geography, and it's the level. And it translates into compensation, directly translates to, this is the base salary based on those three factors, and this is the variable compensation based on those three factors. And again, we do not deviate away from that. Everyone who is in that role level position has that pay. And the way that we have those levels defined is we have published internally technical skills by level and behavioral skills by level. So it's not this subjective, mysterious, why is someone a senior 2 and I'm a mid 2, right? Like what? It's very, very clear. And what we do is we have all of our managers fill out what's called a talent development card twice a year on all of those capabilities. And what they say is, here's where you rank in this matrix on each of these capabilities. And so people are very clear on where they are, where the development areas are. And then we do promotion cycles once a year where people have the opportunity to raise their hand and say, I think I did it. I think I'm at the next level. And we have a 360-degree view process that we put people through. Now, what this allows people to do is, as they're planning, their year ahead, they're able to see, if I get this promotion, this is the comp I will be at. And so it's again, I know times in my career where I knew I was up for a promotion, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't actually know what that meant until after the promotion happened. And then there's like this very awkward, are you supposed to negotiate? Is that the final, is that just what it is? And for us, what this really does is it allows us transparency. It takes down the feeling of, am I being paid equitably? Is this fair as a like, across my peers? And it really just takes out a lot of the confusion in the process, to be really honest. And for some people might be like, well, how do you know that when you hire them, right? What if you made the wrong call? So what we have is documented a 90-day window. So when new hires come in that 90-day window, if we feel like we've hired them at the wrong level, and we typically will hire low, because it's much harder if you hire high, we'll typically hire low, and we'll say, hey, look, come in 90 days. If you show us that you really are a lead one in those first 90 days, automatic, we'll put you and we'll change your comp up to that level. Not a problem. So we give ourselves a little wiggle room in that system, so that we make sure that we are like accurately leveling. When someone's internal, we obviously see their work day to day. We know that, but external, it can be a little bit tricky. We really loved making transparency part of the comp process, and also just ensuring that we were removing as much subjectivity as possible in the process, because that, again, is where a lot of confusion and emotionality can come into play. So based on the way that we structure, equity is essentially built into the system.
Jessica, there were so many gold nuggets in what you just mentioned. We could turn that into multiple blog posts if we wanted to. So let's unpack some of it a little bit further.
Okay.
So one thing you said was, the way you did this successfully is there was no mystery behind the comp, right? You had the numbers, the salary, the equity, the levels, the job description, the skills and competencies. This is shared with employees, managers, so everyone inside Very understands what that means. There's no mystery, and then you have your merit cycles, and you do adjustments for candidates if they come in and they prove that they're actually a level higher, or like, so there's flexibility. So it's not necessarily hard and fast. It's very clearly defined, and there is a circular loop to make adjustments for candidates and employees. And that's amazing. So the more crisp you are, I think people do one half of it where they'll define the bands and the levels and the job titles, but then as an employee, if you're comparing yourself maybe naturally to your peers or other people in seat for the same duration, how do you know if you are overperforming or underperforming? You kind of have to look at the skills at the company level, but also maybe based off the feedback loop with your managers, like, what were your expectations? Because, a senior software engineer in one team might have different goals than a senior software engineer in a different team. So it is more dialed in. And so you're providing all of that insight so that the end employee and the candidate can really understand where they sit.
Yes. And I think one of the things you just said is, that alignment internally. And this is where I think that's where sometimes people hesitate. I mean, like leadership teams hesitate to roll out something that's a little bit more structured and transparent. They want the slack in the system. And it's because, to your point, they might not be fully aligned, right? Like they might, and that's where you have to take the time. You have to have the process. You have to have the documentation. You have to have a communication plan. You have to have all of those things so that you can ensure that you have the alignment for this to be successful.
Absolutely. And so maybe going back in time, so when you first joined Very, was there a pay strategy in place? Was there job architecture in place? Where were you? Where was that? And how did that evolve? Why did you flesh this out?
So there's been an evolution. I will say Very has always, even before me, been incredibly transparent. They used to actually at one point have fully transparent compensation when they were much smaller. So everyone's comp was listed. And we actually removed that over time just because it did get incredibly complicated, because there's a number of individuals, sales is a great example, where their comp is structured so differently because of the base between base and variable. A lot of times, like leadership at certain levels, it's very different in terms of the compensation formula, and it started to get really complicated as we grew and had more of like one of a kind roles. But we felt really strongly that having this structure in the areas where we have more than one of a kind, right? Like this makes a lot of sense to have this published. And we're, we are very transparent in our financials generally, actually way more than most companies are. So
Sure.
where people could see that comp is in our expense line, because we do show that to the company every year. So it's not like it's a full mystery as to what goes into the expenses and comp, but we just don't have it broken down by person, again, because it just got, as we got bigger, it got more complicated. But in terms of what we've done, again, the transparency on job descriptions was a little bit hit or miss, because at the time, again, when you're a startup and you're growing, you kind of don't know. You kind of have to go out into the market, right? A lot of times people don't have a Harris in their life, and they're going out to the market and they're waiting to hear what people say to them, and that's how they're calibrating when you're growing. That's, by the way, not the right way to do that, because especially for people like us, we're across 5 markets. We've got a full range of functions. So we really got very intentional about not only listing out in our job descriptions those tight salary bands, the breakdown of variable versus base, and also we put all of our benefits in. We started really laying that out from the very beginning in those job descriptions. We would send a benefit one-sheeter to really look at, just the full package early on. Because again, we are really intentional about not deviating from our structure. And so why not be honest and upfront about that early on?
Total rewards, the total package, communicating
total rewards, all of it up front. Here's what it is. So if you actually look, and we looked at this not too long ago, I don't know how it's June, but we looked at this, at that hindsight to last year, and our acceptance rate from offer to accepted last year, we only had one person decline us. Because
that is incredible.
Because we had talked to them the entire time about what the offer was going to be. So the offer was not a surprise. The offer was, people go into the final interview. So we give everything up front. We talk about it through the process. And then what we do is our final interview is actually always with our CEO and one other member of the executive team. And we have a prep call with the hiring manager and the candidate before the final interview. And the hiring manager in that conversation says, I just want to reiterate, this is what the offer will be. If you get through this interview, this is what the offer will be. And if they at that point even say, you know what, I thought you guys are great, I thought a lot about it, it just doesn't work for me, no problem, we canceled the final interview. So what that has done is it alleviates the pressure points through the system. You're not waiting to see, we're never waiting to see, is a person going to accept? We know if they get through that process, they are in.
You've largely taken the mystery out of that whole process. Like, will they, won't they? Like it's an interview's a matchmaking process, right? Like it's also for the candidate to see, is this the right role? Is this the right comp? Is the right set of benefits? So it's just more fair. So that's clearly one of the benefits of doing this is being able to be really dialed in and providing the best candidate experience, hiring them hopefully more effectively, and having a 99.9% conversion rate. That's amazing. What were some of the other kind of value adds as a business, right? So a lot of these programs like Pay Strategy, people team will lead and they're not able to maybe explain or justify to the business why it's important. And you seem to have a lot of buy-in from your leadership team. So I think it'll be really important for other folks who are maybe thinking about this or struggling to kind of communicate the value of this. Could you articulate that?
Sure. Now, I think it's important. What a ride we've had all the last couple of years with the market and what jobs have looked like. We had this kind of spike and peak in 2022. Then we kind of went into this layoff. So what I'm about to say also, it might be less meaningful in this market right now, but I think it's going to come back. It always does, right? Markets are always circular. That's going to come back. One of the big drivers with this rollout was driving retention and upskilling our workforce. And I think if you look at it, okay, so why is that important? So a lot of people, especially in the technology world, there's constantly new technology. That's the space that we work within. We're always kind of pressing the boundary. What's next? What's new? What's bigger? And so we are really incentivized as a business to have people who are continuously learning and growing, right? Them upskilling and being driven to upskill is a win for themselves and their own development. It's a win for us as a business, and it's a win for our clients because we can take on more interesting and complex technology challenges and partners as we continue to upskill. And so for us, the ability to lay out all of this, as I described, not only the comp bands, but also the technical capabilities and also the behavioral capabilities. Everyone has a talent development plan that aligns with those talent development cards. We have an unbelievable group of voracious learners. One of the things I love at Very is if any point you say to somebody, hey, what are you reading right now? I promise you, they are reaching across their desk and they are pulling out 1, 2, 3 books. They're always reading, they're always learning, they're taking a course. That's beneficial to a business. Now, you're going to say, okay, but those people exist everywhere. Sure. I'm sure everywhere has people who always are learning and growing. We all know the people who use professional development stipends when nobody else in the company does, of course, right? But for us, it's a hook. There is a quantifiable number that it sits ahead of that person of what their compensation will look like should they upskill in this way, in this time frame. And any business owner, CEO, founder, anyone is going to look at that and they're going to say, wow, the ROI on that investment, helping that, pushing them into learning and growing and upskilling is going to come back to the business.
That's amazing. So building out your comp strategy is not just about comp. It's actually about learning and development. It's really about career growth, all of these, and performance as well. I think you mentioned that earlier. It's all really tied together into that career growth. I guess that's one conclusion I drew from that. And the other one was culture starts from day one, right? Like from the day the candidate is accepting the offer, finding the right person, setting the right expectations. And so it's like the other thing that you've been able to achieve is really create that culture of learning and growth and encouraging that. And I'm sure that's communicated in the candidate offer as well in terms of total rewards. And I imagine you have some benefits and perks around that too. So it's not just a series of silos, like here's the candidate experience and here's the employee experience and here's what growth plan looks like. It's all connected.
Absolutely. And I'd even go back further. You said like from the moment they accept the offer, it's from the moment they find us. It's from the moment they find us and the first conversation they have for us. I will tell you, we have had people who they've interviewed with us and we did not select them to go forward, and they have referred people to us. I mean, that is because they see us and they go, wow, you are doing things differently. This is interesting. And I think that's one of the things that I do think right now, it doesn't take so much to stand out as a great employer right now. Honestly, just being open and honest with people, being transparent around compensation and how you pay them, laying out a path for them. How many people, Harris, right now are saying, I don't even know how I would get to the next level, or I don't know what it looks like. I don't know the process. I mean, I have friends who are senior directors, VPs at big corporations, and they are clueless as to how that would happen. They don't know. And look, it gets more tricky the higher you go. That's the reason why it's the shape of a pyramid. It gets trickier to navigate, but for the majority of it, it should be an open and honest conversation and dialogue. It should not be so much smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we've established what pay strategy and comp strategy is, why it's important, how it's impacted you. We clicked a little bit into how you iterate on it, but for the group here, I think it would be great to kind of also learn some of the tactics on how you iterated on this, who are the stakeholders, did you need buy-in from other executives, any challenges and hiccups? I have a few more questions, but let's start there.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, I'm sure some people are sitting there going, I don't know how in the world I would convince people, like other members of my leadership or executive team, this was a good idea, right? Because there's so many, I actually, after that breakfast we met at Harris, I rode the subway with someone else sitting there, and is an HR person. And she said, my CEO barely talks about compensation for the company with me. Like, how do you kind of crack this code? And I think it's a few things. I think, one, you absolutely need to gain buy-in. Here's the other thing that people need to understand. And man, if we learned anything from these series rounds of layoffs for a lot of these companies this last year, is that people are going to talk about it all, right? Like, how many of these viral posts on social media or things, like, people are talking about it. And I think as the demographics of our workforce continue to change, I will say specifically, like the Gen Zers that I have, like, they are very open in discussing compensation. The level of taboo is coming down fast. I mean, like all of these new terms, like loud budgeting, which really just means talking about it with people, like, right? Like, all of these concepts are being introduced. The workforce is changing. They're going to talk about it if you don't. And so, don't you want to control the narrative? Don't you want to feel like all of your other aspects of your business, that there is a strategic and directional plan for the way that you compensate people? Don't you want to feel like you're controlling that message? And the other reality is that for most businesses, not all, but most businesses, payroll is your most expensive line item, right? Like, that is the biggest expense you have is payroll. So when you have strategies for every expense in your business except the biggest one, right? Like, just think about it for a minute. And I find, just by asking provocative questions, and I'm a big question asker with people, I can ask anybody who's ever worked with me, it kind of stops them for a minute and just think about it. And then what I usually say is, what are you scared of? What are you afraid? Because a lot of times holding on to the information is fear, and they're afraid of something. So what are you afraid of? Let's talk about that. So I think when you're talking about top level buy-in and conversation, it's one, getting them to recognize that it is silly not to have a really tight strategy around your biggest expense line, right? Any business person will think that way. And then the second part is, what are you afraid of? And let's write down all your fears. Let's write down everything you're afraid of. Let's talk about it. And that requires some space, some reflection. So you have to have those conversations. Then you have to be, like you said, like, whoa, you're buttoned up. It's like, oh yeah, if you're going to do this, you better have every base covered. So what's the plan? How does it tie in together? What's the narrative, right? What's the communication plan? Why is this important? What's in it for you, the executive? What's in it for you, the IC? What's in it for you, the manager? How would people see that there's a hook here that's important for them, and them understanding this strategy? And then how do you have transparency and documentation around all of it? Again, I even think, just like, to be perfectly honest, this is not comp specific, but the matrix that we have defined about technical capabilities by level,
Sure.
a lot of companies still don't have that, but they have people at different levels. So how would people know, right? So there's just documentation, clarity, expectation setting. All of these are really, really critical components. In terms of, once we got to, anytime we make a change with these things, man, we've had a couple of people who have kind of said, wow, you're brave, because we do everything in a town hall. So we're on camera and we are right there, and that chat is on, and you just got to say the things, but you have to have a plan. And so we always tie it back into our values. We talk about what the plan is. We talk about the format for asking questions. So we'll have, sometimes, when we've made a bigger change, we'll have not just one, but 2 town hall conversations. I'm doing one-on-one conversations on the side, because sometimes there's real individual questions that people don't feel comfortable with. And that's okay. Everything does not have to be, Everything does not have to be out in the open when it's something super personal. That's okay too. But you just have to be ready to have a lot of conversations. And I think that is the other thing that people fear. Like in that fear category, they are afraid of having those conversations, because if you are not fully clear and aligned, you might feel like you're going to misstep. But if you have your leadership team aligned, you won't. Go ahead, Harris. Sorry.
No. There's so if you have your leadership team aligned, then it's easy to go to the town hall and have that conversation. Tactically, do you also, I mean, depending on the change, I assume, but do you sometimes, maybe if it's a larger change, then, from executives, roll it out to managers and train them, educate them, and then go to the employee, or do you rip the Band-Aid? How do you think about that? What's the right strategy and when?
We will typically go to the directors first. We don't always go to the managers for a variety of reasons, but sometimes, but a lot of times we'll go to the directors, because a lot of times they're like the operational function leader, and so we'll talk to them about what the change is. We'll get questions from them. Typically, once we get to the director level, it's more about ask us questions. What do you think what's the feedback? Where do you think our blind spots are? It's not up for negotiation necessarily, but it's up for conversation in terms of what did we miss? What are the big questions? And actually those conversations is a good tactic too. We typically use to form FAQs. So we document everything. Wow. We personally use Guru as our sort of like internal space to have everything documented. And so we'll not only outline here's the change, here's this, the supporting documentation, link to any sort of, documents or things that people might need. And then we'll typically have a corresponding FAQ that we will say, we will continue to build this out as questions come in. Because if you have a question, somebody else has a question. So we will use that. And then we will just get in front of everybody. And a lot of times the way that we approach work in general is we're really big fans of the test and try. And I think, again, the larger the organization, the harder it gets to do that, right? But in smaller orgs, if you set the standard that testing and trying is part of your culture and who you are, a lot of times I will say to everybody as we're rolling things out, everybody, I don't think this is going to be perfect. We very likely missed something. There's something that we're going to learn along the way. Please, everyone, approach this with positive intent, ask questions, provide feedback. And honestly, the team does. They really will. A lot of times they'll come to me and be like, hey, I was looking through this and I was wondering about this. Did I miss it? Is it not in the documents? And a lot of times they'll be like, great question. Hadn't thought about that. Let's talk about it. But I think really helping to reframe asking and learning together with positive intent is the way that you can kind of make it through some of those big transformative moments.
Yeah, maybe the analogy I'm drawing is like, at least both of us, we're tech companies, so iteration is a big part of software development, and
yes.
It's accepted, it's known, it's understood. Our customers understand that too.
Yes.
And why not use the same mindset and philosophy for internal decisions, processes as well? If you set the right expectation, then people understand it and anchor to it, and it's a lot easier versus it's never done, right? Like the organization is growing and changing, so naturally your programs, your strategies have to change as well.
Yes. And it's a great point, Harris. Actually, we use agile development, not waterfall. So for us, it's even easier because we're just like, this is literally agile development, right? Like we're not waiting for the next product release. We're going to do it as we go, and we're going to iterate and we're going to make changes. And so I think it really does, to your point, like there's that mentality of, you know what, that's okay. Like it's not so scary. I think a lot of times, again, going back to a lot of the times, the reasons that executives hold back on these types of decisions is they're afraid of something. What if we didn't get it perfect? What if we missed something? And it's like, who rolls out anything that's perfect? Let's like release ourselves from thinking that and instead create the forums and the feedback loops and just have everyone frame it as, let's talk about it. Let's see. Well, I'm sure we miss things, and being open, not presenting it as a fully perfect package that's, zero flaws.
That's amazing. It's such a small point, but actually it's a really big point. Like I think setting the right expectations, that's That's amazing. Maybe shifting gears, Jessica. So you mentioned you're a remote first company. We are as well. You're in 5 markets. How did that play a role in some of the decisions? I'd love to kind of unpack that.
Yeah, this is so actually interestingly, I think a lot of people listening probably would be like, man, this transparency thing, it's probably going to get a lot of pushback. It's really hard. We actually got pushback in being more transparent, more equitable. We had people who really wanted to go the other end. And so we do have different pay in different markets. And that is because there is different equity in different markets. And I'll give a great example. So we have a few Argentinians. If anybody's been following Argentina the last couple of months, they've had quite a wild ride. But they, there's a lot going on in their currency, and so we have a software engineer who he lives in Argentina, but not in Buenos Aires. But one day we use Slack. We love Slack, and we've got lots of fun social channels in Slack, and we talk, and it's a fun time. So we use Slack both for work, but also to have fun because we're fully distributed. And one day we were talking about everyone's homes and how it's different but similar. So he gave us a quick tour on a video on Slack of his apartment, and then it was amazing. It was little balcony, and he's like, and I pay $200 USD a month. And we were like, okay, this is why, and this was it was a great example. He didn't even mean it to be. This is why paying the same, there's a lot of people who have this idea of pay the same for the same role, regardless of geography. And we're like, this is why it's not equitable to pay the same for the same role across different geographies, because the cost of living basis is so significantly different. But again, this is why it's really important to have it defined. This is what it looks like. So we just have multipliers. So we have 3 main geographies. So we have US, we have Canada, and then we have Latin America. And they are multipliers of each other, so people can quickly calculate. But it's laid out on the grid. You don't have to calculate anything. It's there, but it shows what the multipliers are across the geographies. But I think it's important to have examples like that apartment. So one of our software developers who lives in a small town in the United States of America was like, I couldn't live in a shack for $200 a month. It's just not feasible. But this person has a really nice apartment. And so those examples, I think, help people to wrap their head around the idea that pay does look different in different places. It's important to educate and understand the differences on that. And the other thing that we have that's slightly different, but again, we're highly transparent, is there's some different benefits, right? So there's different benefits. What's the 401k in the US is an RRSP in Canada and does not exist in Latin America. So it's hard to be equitable on some of those benefits because they don't exist, but let's just lay out what they are. And so here's the US benefits, here's the Canadian benefits, here's Latin American benefits. So it's very, very clear to people what exists for them. So I think, again, the multi-market, which I love, happy to talk to anybody about it any day. I think it's great. I think there's lots of benefits to it. But I do think it's really important for you to educate yourself and be able to speak intelligently as to why the differences exist. So you're not feeling stuck if people ask questions.
Amazing. Okay. Jessica, you talked about how people are the number one asset and also the number one line item on the balance sheet for most organizations. That's exactly why we started Candor IQ, because we felt everything you said resonated, right? We felt that a lot of the solutions out there were about benchmarking data is here, org charts here, your performance information's here. Ultimately, what people want to do is hire the best people and then retain those people and help them grow and kind of connect all the different systems and the processes together. And that was the hypothesis for Candor IQ. So just naturally, it was amazing to kind of hear all the things you say and how that resonates with our worldview in terms of helping solve compensation and workforce planning. I know we're at the last 5 minutes. I could talk to you for hours, and
I feel the same, Harris.
If I would have missed my MTA ride if I was sitting next to you and talking, because I would have lost track. And I'm not good with that public transportation living in San Francisco. But A couple of two more things to kind of do in the next 5 minutes. One is I want to flip the script. Let you ask me any questions. We make it fun. I know I've been asking you questions for the last 40 minutes, and I'm happy to spend a couple of minutes on that. And then, the last minute or so, just takeaways, like, things for people to take away, because there's so much gold here, gold nuggets. But I'll flip it over to you. What are things that you're thinking about? Anything you want to ask me? I'm happy to improv.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. Like there's a timeliness to what you all are doing and building, because I think there's a lot of questions. And again, I think people are really starting to be more communicative around what they make, right? Like that, like I think about like my parents, for example, like they would never talk about that, like especially inside of a workplace. But now it's becoming, more, people are talking and they want to learn more. So I think this education is so important. But I think, you, like you said, you work with a lot of people who, this is their first time they're doing this, probably, that they're like building a strategy. What do you think are sort of like the important, like first things to know and consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think when people take on this project of either building for the first time or updating or revamping their pay strategy or job architecture, like they think they have to boil the ocean, revamp everything. And sometimes that is the case, but usually no, especially for younger organizations. Start with maybe one department or job family. Like if you're a 50-person company and most of your team members are in engineering or sales, why don't you build out for those two? It'll get you really, really far, right? Like take one job family, build out the ladders, build out the skills, as you said, and you have to go all the way. So it's not just about titles and ranges. Like, what are the technical skills? What are the other skills required? What are some of the competencies? Build it out, roll it out, and then test it. And the other thing we encourage people to do is there's a lot of frameworks out there. So and you want to be. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have 8 levels just because Radford says you have to have 8 levels. So take a pass at what makes sense for your organization. Start small and simple, like and then iterate your way into more complexities. I think you touched on this earlier. It's easy, like unwinding the complexity is harder, but going from simple to more complex is just a lot easier. And the other thing that you said is communicate that out, like why we're doing it, like how this is going to help the employees understand their career ladder and like progression, and help us upskill and hire the right new candidates, bring them in, get that out there too. And then from there you can build out and flesh out more. But I usually encourage people, like if you don't have the resources and money or time to kind of do all of it, start small, and then iterate from there.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, I think so many people just get overwhelmed, and I think that's why having partners like you is so important, because you might feel like you don't have the education, or you don't, you're unclear where to start. So I think making partners is really important, especially to your point. If you're doing it for the first time, or what you have is so outdated, like don't feel like you've got to go and figure it out on your own. Because let me tell you what, I don't know how many people go and try to figure out comp on Glassdoor, but that is the wrong place to go look, right? You need real actual information in order to make it be, your comp strategy be successful.
That's right. If you can't explain compensation to an employee, then it's probably something wrong. And if you have to quote Glassdoor, that usually means there's something wrong. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. I know we have just a minute left. What are some of the key takeaways you want people to kind of go home with, and how should they connect with you if they're interested in just becoming friends, building a community, asking you questions, I'm sure?
I love it. Yes. No, let's chat. So find me on LinkedIn, send me a request. I'm always so interested to learn and to talk. I think we're working in a really interesting and dynamic moment in the world right now. So I'm part of Chief, and they published an article this week that was like, CHROs are the new C-suite power players. And I was like, all right, I don't know about that. But it's interesting because there's so much changing, just like we were talking about the demographics, the way of work, distributed companies or hybrid companies, the people complexities are continuing, are increasing. It's not so simple as everybody walks in to the one place at 9 a.m., punches a clock, and kind of sits down and does work. That's not the way it's working. It's continuing. The way of work is becoming more complex. There's aspects of this that are really nuanced, and things. I always say, there's a lot of things. AI is so hot right now, and it's everywhere. And AI can't solve these problems. People have to solve these problems because they're really nuanced and incredibly complicated. And so having robust conversations like this, learning about what other people are doing, is so important. So my takeaway, I guess, is what I'm trying to allude to is find people to have those conversations with. Find the partners like a Harris who can help you navigate the conversations. Don't feel like you're alone. Don't feel like you're in a vacuum, because you want to make sure that you have the people and the information in order to make really, really smart decisions. And again, it's not one size fits all. Every company is different. The way that you incentivize and drive performance, compensation is very, very unique. But you need to be educated and have perspective on it before you can make anything work.
Amazing. I think that's maybe a great place to pause. Jessica, you are incredibly insightful. So many nuggets around strategy. So much great tactical advice. Great anecdotes. This was just a really amazing session. So I'm grateful for you to come on the show. Episode number 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Harris. It was a pleasure to be here. Everybody have a great day.
Have a nice day, everyone. Bye.